求多教所知，我刚才跟你做这段子，所见的那公婆的婆，马天就点的那就结束，的这个我就那上次，那多个就都做上，一切叫做是这个我。找不见的所能让愿望，我不求你就了下次。千秋颠簸正面的月有千多着我就了下次。丢着见着西波松梦见，要命之点就了下次。我不突厥见颠簸，当前前的颠簸。是那一点叫做些，的前写了上次。特别的强着我就越远给送的住。觉得得到就不，现就了上次。这年这月老样的，老婆到老头的。先给当婆一点点，原地那样相思。别把这样能小心，给我别说错我。让给三年用死的，六年上的天波。干嘛着的嘛别动，就嘛是我去过。没了路到真道不，留些就能跌倒。是那地狱堂前是佛言，国风当年君君着地。高当那当七月老主，随便出来着我哟。
Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, "How should the son of the lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom?" Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Sharadvatiputra with his words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance and so on, up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path. No wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha. Shariputra, this is how a bodhisattva mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the bodhisattva mahasattva noble Avalokiteshvara that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
多劫见波的些多劫中，就在的罗波多那罗波，便就周边波多阿的想，要来心罗就罗所我的，想波同灭一念当着的，就的的月的当周边的，这上各上六年所念我。教之是别知了所望的，然后有一面兄弟入住到我找不这边不就去，上街观众跑跑要是说，上莫大爷知了所望的，协助当地中阿的上，高当电边面部中的。念就那些过去说了说，搞到了我那了说的，看见些的自己中华梦，我到这边我说的早的，到我这边到我开着的，要是就把接了说的。就算跟的老妈多的长，看了光的些年之中的，就当天幕蒙着自在的，转见老妈当了说我的，让家说了跟了到也没。给上他把这边中就，在这边到现在把也。现在些年当了说我的，叫我更多养到那么多，这面确实别了龙学的，撒当那就有的绕着的，多久讲给过。人道修三界去当作界就能想就不多多年就做界，大业去些就别做那界，到了平息三界如果修三界就做界就能想就不多多年就做。大业去些就别做那界。若了平息三界，如果修三界就初界就那想就不多当年就做，大业去界就别做那界，若了平息三界，如果修啊，哎呀。哎呀，当然这个他的小老客的听到的了，的确我都开始讲了，人家那个这个去给些什么给嘛的，你我送这小伙看这去讲那样，让些看着我去了，偏偏去到了截图个那，到去的今天刚给讲呢，你短到天把去切过了，但我这短到天把去用别切到了，别这结果了的。
So, as we have recited the verse of taking refuge in 3 Jews, so here in this verse, whatever the actions that we may undertake through our body, speech, and mind is something that's beneficial to oneself and that of other beings. And if one's actions of body, speech, and mind becomes beneficial to oneself and that of other beings, then we're engaging in a meaningful actions. So, however, we are trying our best at all time that we engages in actions, something that is meaningful, right? So not only for meaningful here, the meaningful for oneself, but meaningful for other beings as well.
那我这个7年的两大天把去结果，两大天把去结果是呢，但那我做刚刚别落去就讲的那个的讲究的，大的把那我做给这嘛的为是，主要就讲的呢， 주주는 시나 단도 테마지 제야서는 소소소 걔네 메뚜기인데 지로 와 다지 도고는 산노 동에나 대단한 벌 사회동 강연을 제 대단한 벌 메세 려려지 로버로 왔다 말아서 계획이 산다.
So now here, if we were to ask questions to ourselves, up until now, have we really engaged in the actions of our body, speech, and mind in a meaningful way? To answer to this question, according to Dharma, probably not. We're not comfortable or bold enough to answer, to say yes to this question. However, if we were to ask questions, according to mundane standpoint of mundane standpoint, in other words, yes, we did something that is meaningful to ourselves because we have been engaging in all kinds of body, speech, and mind, something that makes meaningful to oneself. It is therefore we are all having enough to eat, enough to wear, place to stay, and so forth.
당가서 야제로도 가는 로에 말해서는 가서 배 년년이 돈 세고 세잖아요. 가서 가서 간제지나 니만의 여바리지 코로나 시작되는 로딩이지만도 주연에서 저전에 년디고는 로바인스에 가서 때 년년이 대명화 있잖아. 하마க்கும் 신이다 하고에 대로 랭아에서 니모도 만져가지 가버려. 된지 공실을 자샤님마도 내 주연행에 내 로바인스에지 다서 가서 라신 강가 대명화이나 네 하마도 집에 지자로 와.
So here, if you really look at ourselves, to examine our actions of the body, speech, and mind, we hardly see something that we really made change in ourselves. Because we always engage in actions of the body, speech, and mind in accordance with our own habituations, the patterns of our habituations, which is imbued by negative thoughts and emotions or mental afflictions.
대체 다치 제게 나왔으네. 가르쳐게 임베sel라나. 아니 내내 주베 가서기다. 제거나 제단지 시에그래. 제단 땀보보다 스레서서나. 야비 타도가 땀보보다네 땀보투병 뭐래. 아니 대내야마 집이 내 가서기 거스고 봐네. 라레 집에 나마 대다기. 내 강한 나바 중에 나위에다서 된데게 천하질 해봐라. 아니 라마 대다기 아니 다 고소도 진인데 준비 시에들라. 아니 라게 된게 나가 될 미바 대체.
So now I must do something. I must engage in the actions of my body, speech, and mind, something that really becomes meaningful for myself and that of other beings. So how do we really engage in the meaningful actions of the body, speech, and mind? Because we just can't just say and go ahead and engage in actions that become meaningful to oneself and that of other beings. This will not happen. So we need to know what actions of body, speech, and mind really is meaningful to oneself and that of others. So therefore, we need to know that. In order to know that, we have to learn how to engage in actions of meaningful actions of body, speech, and mind. So therefore, in order to learn and how to know, engage in these positive actions, we then rely upon our teachers, including Buddha Shakyamuni, all the way to the lineage gurus of the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment. It is therefore we must, imagine that all those lineage gurus, being including Buddha Shakyamuni, being in front of oneself, in the space, in front of oneself, and reflecting one's mind upon the body, qualities of the body, speech, and minds of those great beings.
다 된게 제발래 다 말하기 된다 된바 제발래 같이 거기 된다 된바지 제와 자제다 안지 단 지금 말에 세고로 단 지금 말에서는 다 저와당 하데 집어 제장지 약한도야나 감각이 되다 줘야게 소소를 내바 제나다 감각이 저 제샤와는 야어로 인자는 거네 저와이나 같은 남비 추는 송바 나긴 저와이나 근데 라니게 단다 주비 칼레 저와 당 진짜 단다 주비 칼레 주바니 교노기 차네레 마도 칼레 집에 지자래 근데 교노기 차네 능게 선제 타지게 된데 제게 인생에 랭거드 빼셔와이나 근데 곧 자고 지셔선로 차로와 인자네 된저지게네 선바종버지게 아니 지링가 단단 되게 선제 되는데 인게로 고지게 되는데 냐도라는 지 대화도 내마디 동해도 저지 제긴다 상인지 지 경로 수천부지 로천부지 제로 저와이나 네 라니 선제 타지게 된 제보 셰바본지 차와이나 근데 될라지 선바야부지 그 말어 된저지 용도 제긴다.
So now here, when speaking about it, engaging in meaningful actions for oneself. So here now, according to, as a practitioner of Dharma, it is not just adequate to really engage in actions that are meaningful for one's own self alone, because we know there are countless beings who have a similar wish to achieve happiness and overcome sufferings. So therefore, may I not only engage in actions that body, speech, and mind, which becomes meaningful for oneself, that also may my actions of body, speech, and mind become meaningful for other sentient beings as well. So then this really becomes a really meaningful motivations, and whatever the actions that derive from such motivations will become meaningful for oneself and that of other sentient beings. Because whether one wants to become one's action becomes meaningful for that of oneself and other beings, it really depends on our motivations, right? You don't. I am going. I'm just working only solely for myself and that of other beings. And if I engages in any actions of the one body, speech, and mind, it doesn't require extra efforts, whether working for oneself or working for other sentient beings. So it is better that if we can, right from the beginning, if we have a motivations to helping other sentient beings and working for the welfare of other sentient beings, then one's actions of the body, speech, and mind, of particular of the practice, will really become meaningful for oneself and that of other sentient beings. So therefore, uh, if, think about that all the sentient beings who have this motivations, who have the desire for becoming happy and having a happy life and so forth. So therefore, take a responsibility that I myself will may I become myself as a provider of happiness of all other sentient beings. So with this motivations, let's take a couple of minutes to meditate. With these motivations, the teachings that we are receiving is the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment.
다 자유 사직에서는 자유 사직시 주고 좀바 때문에 제가 비켜와 당할 기바집이 추제 쳐와 저와님도 님이 줄라 내시 저다샤와 당방만 너무 저때 뭐 자유 사직이
So let's begin discussing on these teachings by laying out this 4 important or the major outlines, beginning from the greatness of the greatness of the authors given in order to show the teachings as noble souls, showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender respect for the teachings, and the greatness of the enabling one to know that all of the teachings are free of contradictions, and how to listen to the teachings with both teachings and these authors are great.
다 자유 사직이 발라 사직이 제랑저 자와 신이 되비스다 테크놀로지다 자이니 바니스 아니 종모이라 아니 주시티체 동보 somebody 혼자 소리치체.
So now, in order to engage in the actual discussions of these teachings, we'll then begin from the outlines of how to rely on the teachers, the root of one's spiritual path, and how the students train their mind after having relied on their teacher.
다 테크놀로지다 자이니 발라니 데이터나 니볼레 비슈고다 니보 제탄레 비츠니 다 도문데스 다 니보 제탄레 비츠라니 라치 나자라 메바치스다 니볼레 뭐치 다 도문데스 다 니볼레 정말로 송 주부 충원다 통모야 나제를 만냥서네 주부 된다도 주부 챔피언 나제를 만냥서네 제제 다 도문인데서 다 주부 챔피언 나제를 만냥서네 저라 송 대체는 주부고 담바 센제 코나데마 센데 주다 주부 센제네 셔발로 루츠에제 다 도문인데서 다 센제네 셔발로 루츠가 송 센제네 로발로 로비게 전세 로바레레올로 로가 선제만 주바 템바 로발로 로베레바 니시바지 다 도문인데서 다 로발로 로베레바 니시바라니 테바치 못 절러라서다 치바도 도제 테바 도츠에제 다 동보라 송 상센제 로발로 한대정 자네 저세제 담바송 손에 제단에 비츠 다 도문인데서 다 손에 제단에 비츠라니 강라로 비제 텔라로바네 텔라로비레바지 다 도문인데 다 텔라로비레바라니 쇼바치로로 제다 치바도 파세 타만년 도츠에제 다 대에는 저세제 담바송네 아니 쇼바치로로 제다 치바도 파세 타만년로 도츠 니잖아네 아니 치바도 파세 타만년로 도츠라 아니 고스포바 사제텔라데.
So if we're on the particular chapter of the Serenity, which is the last 2 perfections of the Bodhisattva's practice.
되지. 다 되는 게 하는 좀 말라는데. 다 동보라 사지페지 주의 개념을 주. 아니 신의 신라게 표현해 봐. 되니 되는데 근데 되지도 돼 봐. 아니 신의다 하도에 뭐 되니가 강급이 전세. 아니 고랭해 봐. 되니라 라우스. 다 되는 게 가서는 신라게 뭐 가도 돼요 선수. 저 가도 다 사지지 아니 되는데 가도 가서 자서 되는 선수. 대리가 용도 대해서 러시아에서 좀 뭔데 쳐와도 용 뭐쳐와도 용기 지시의 용 시제모가 당연히도 와. 대이 것은 이렇게잖아. 대신 냥도 상도. 대해서 로는 저거도 투나 상수. 그런 거 중간에 말해 봐. 뭐이게 세그로 하시는 것을 방식으로 말해 봐.
So on this particular chapter of the teachings on serenity and insight, which begins from laying out the 6 outlines. Out of 6 outlines, we're on the 3rd outlines, the nature of serenity and insight.
다 되는다. 가슴 아니다. 되는다. 신에다 하동세에 이 쳐봐대 미국의 쳐봐세가 말해스. 아니 유를 제지도 냠바자도 줄선 시장 대화 전전바다 소소 제도지 류선 시장 대화 쳐봐된 렘바니기마도 미국의 조금 말해스. 세대 그 넘버 세 지레도.
So we already talked about the difference between the meditative serenity and insight, right? We talked about that because the meditative serenity and insight are not differentiated in terms of their respective object of meditation. For there is meditative serenity that knows the emptiness, and there is an insight which does not know the emptiness. So, in other words, now it doesn't really differentiate, in terms of their respective object of their meditations. This is something that we need to know.
Because not due to the not in terms of not their respective object of meditation, because there are as serenity which realizes emptiness. There are insight or special insight that doesn't realize emptiness and so on. So therefore, it is nothing to do with the object of meditation. So now here, it's briefly and very comprehensively mentions difference between the two, serenity and insight, where it says meditative serenity or shine is your mind quitting, the quitting movement towards external object and then abiding on the internal object of meditations. Insight or Lakdong is a superior, Lakdong, which means the superior, special seeing. And so the internal object meditation and insight in Lakdong is superior seeing or special seeing or insight. So now, etymology of shine, which is translated in English as a serenity. But if we, the shine etymologically is shi is calm, ne is abiding. So therefore, it is calm abiding. And lak is a superior, tong is seeing, it's a superior seeing. So now here, we're reading from the text, page 18, it's the last paragraph. Some claim that the mind resting in the non-discursive state without vivid intensity in serenity, while such a mind with vivid intensity is insight. So this is not correct because it contradicts the definition of serenity and insight that are established at length in source, such as the words of the conquerors, and the deities of the regent, and the text of Asanga and Kamalashila's stages of meditations. So this text says that meditative serenity is attention concentrated one-pointedly on an object of meditation, while insight is wisdom that properly distinguishes the meaning
of an object of knowledge. And in particular, the presence or the absence of vivid intensity of mind in the non-conceptual consciousness indicates whether the concentration is lax. It is utterly incorrect to claim that it indicates the difference between serenity and insight. This is because in all concentrations of the meditative serenity, you definitely must clear away laxity, and because all concentrations free from laxity and invertibly limpid state of mind, thus identifying concentration in wisdom that focuses on the real nature according to whether your mind knows as its object either of those two selflessness.
되게 고대 오세는데 페이지 고대 오세는 리사래 다 맞죠 신의 옛날에 하통 옛날에 유라 미바 자윤데 거라 면하게 세차랑 아예 메생에 개체때 용거로 와다 든리지라 네 신의다 하통게 체발해서나 네 용모버되던 개거리 아니 개가 마치 신의 인친을 하다 제거를 신화다 제친절라 유라 세차대 차 개거리 세네 아니 되니 체발의 지금 말에 송송.
So this is completely not incorrect, right? It's pretty clear in this sense, because it doesn't really make the differentiations as it is mentioned at the other's standpoint claims about the differentiation between serenity and insight, because they made the different differentiations whether or not the vivid intensity or the vivid intensities and mind vivid intensities inside and without vivid intensities is serenity and so forth. This is completely wrong, because as long as that one is concentrating on the practice of serenity, it must clear away the laxities. And once one is able to clear away the laxity, then one's practice of concentrations will become vivid, and it will really become a clear and vivid. If we were to, if this is the case, then we can always argue that serenity is special insight, because it actually clear away the laxity and has a vivid concentrations.
이 다음에니 가양 종아 로데 또 마도 주고네 무슨 샤이 센데세다 제베 데세다 제베 뭐도바 내면에 주고네 무슨 바 문제데 이 다음에 비테 코나니라 로카 마슈비 데세 뭐도비 땡겐지 받으면 바 예비 싫어 손도.
So then here it says, thus identify concentration in wisdom that focuses on the real nature according to whether your mind knows as its object either of the two selflessness. Do not identify them according to whether your mind rests in non-discursive or clear and blissful state, because there are countless states of concentrations which are blissful, clear, and non-discursive, yet which do not orient your mind towards reality of objects, their lack of self. So now here the two selflessness, we talked about two selflessnesses, is the selflessness of selflessness of a person and selflessness of phenomena, right? So now here it talks about, do not really identify them according to whether your mind rests in non-discursive and clear blissful states, because there are countless states concentration which are blissful, clear, and non-discursive. Which do not orient your mind towards the reality of objects, the lack of self. So, here it doesn't really make the difference whether one realizes the emptinesses or not. Do not identify them according to whether your mind rests in non-discursive, clear, and blissful. So non-discursive, clear, and blissful state alone will not make oneself realizes emptiness. So now here it it explains very clearly, even without finding the view that knows the way things are, any totally non-discursive mind can be adequate to induce bliss and clarity. See, it is.
Tony Magoyang, Mutobi, Tingin, Jawala, Gawa Jonze Jang Mela. Digon Junze Jang Melas. The Digon the same, the condition Jagore Desidi, Dewajan and Sena City, Dewajin Bakanshitila, Lotela Secha Yudero, Desesona. Desematova Sesona, Yunciti Dere, Sena Dewati De, you Sebotoyan.
So now here it says, without understanding emptiness, right? It says, without understanding emptiness, by establishing it in perception, nothing at all, prevents you from developing non-discursive concentrations.
That the Sumudo Lelaina. They go and send rent sin na sensing be too long leron de Jelasa. De Chabana Lutan Saint Gadechewe and Gadechewa Chuni Yimbe, Dewacheba Ningashi. De Chabanasa, Gadi number 72 Senla Secha Wonyana. De se Mutobi Dingen in Tanje de Konani Toba Dubana, Sheja Yang, when Sheja Yang the Jim Meadow. Then Tony Tobi Dingen Zelang, de se Mutoba One, Tony Locama should be Dingen Zelang, de se Mutoba Juma, Chi Manye, Denin Cheva Shagos also.
So if you keep your mind that way for a long time, you cause the wind energies to become serviceable. And once this occurs, nothing precludes the arising of bliss, as it is in the nature of such serviceability to create mental and physical delight and bliss. Once bliss has arisen, then there will be a mental clarity by virtue of mental clarity, by virtue of the quality of clarity in the feelings of the delight and bliss. For this reason, there is not a single authentic source to prove that all blissful, clear, non-discursive concentrations know reality. Therefore, since bliss, clarity, and non-discursive are present in the concentrations that knows emptiness, it very often occurs in the concentration that are not directed towards emptiness. You have to differentiate these two.
That's it. To attend the children. The one also December to Basana Pena, Mason, Jiramboche ye omi tawa manye benghon de la tingen zi tembo shu ji ne ne nga zo ji logic ton na she ro cho za ten ji la cho ne shu bi ka la ne tingen zi la nyamba ja ne cho chang so ma zhe zhe de dang da ge ga wa de la shu ne ne chi se ge ge ye ne ga wa de la zhou zhe dong ne hong bi ka la ne chi se dang da ga wa de la tingen zi ga wa sen to ya ten logic do de de ka la omi tawa ne ma re de se ma to ba la nyamba ja de.
So here now, one thing that once again, it's very important to understand that just by, just being able to rest one's mind in a non-discursive, clear and blissful state alone will not prove that you have gained the realization of middle view or the middle or emptiness, in other words. Here, let's take one example. Here, Lama Tsongkhapa, before he, realizes the middle view, it says he has gained such a, profound insight, which is, resting his mind in the non-discursive, clear and blissful state. It is thus at one point, at one time, when Lama Tsongkhapa was gathered, or Lama Tsongkhapa was participated in gathering an assembly hall with other, Sangha communities, where they were actually engaging in the prayers. He actually rest his mind in non-discursive, clear and blissful states. So all of the monks are actually, completed their sessions and they got out of the monastery, but he still remained in the monastery. Well, because by resting his mind on non-discursive, clear and blissful state. However, he had not realized middle view yet at that time.
Ne chi su ten ge de chi ge ni be ta wa de mi ta wa ta to ba ma yin sen ne la ma o ma be de ju zen ja me ya sen ju zen ja me ya mi ta wa ta to ba de ne pa den da yi jong la de ne ji ma de ta ja xiong den je ba ta shu ne nga so ji song je sen ne je ro de kan je o mi ta to ba de o mi ta wa ta ne ba de ma yin ne pa den da yi jong la de ne ne shu sen na no de na ne chi se ne pa de sha de la pe. So
therefore, we have, if you look at the Lama Tsongkhapa's biography, where it stated that both of his teacher, Lama Omapa, and also the Manjushri had stated that just by resting your mind non-discursively and clear and blissful state is not the realization of middle way. In order to gain a perfect realization of middle way, you should study the great deities, the deities of the great, written by the great master, such as Chandrakriti. So therefore, Lama Tsongkhapa then went to extensive retreat, where he then studied the great deities of Chandrakriti, then said to be a realized, gain a realization of middle view, sorry.
Nghe ta nên nga chu de se mo to ba se de ji de ka sa nga chu to dang shu se ji de lam de ni ga chu mo shu le ge jing de le sa jing do pe na ro pe ne de se mo to ba che de ten je do pe na de se mo to ba de kan de che ge se na nga chu ka so so le de wa dang se na de go ro pe na se 세리 코로 잘라 제 일을 se na ma re kan je se seri 코로 go le yiru mo nya ba ja be go la se ba kan ja sa de la long di ba de chuni re do sen kan la yiru mo nya sa de long ne de paru je la sen de tempo cha be go la long de le rong cha go do long de le rong cha se de long de za no long ro de ba cha go do long za ne ro de ba cha be go la ni se ka sa lu de da sen de le ba de chuni yi song do de na.
So now here is, it is very true, but if one really is able to rest one's mind on the non-discursive and a clear and blissful state of one's mind, then naturally will withdraw your wind within your channels. It is therefore your wind will become serviceable, right? What is meant by your wind become serviceable is because your winds can pass through the channels without any obstructions. That is what is meant by the winds become serviceable. So when one's wind becomes serviceable and able to enter through the entire channel without any obstructions, then the occurrence of the blissful state of mind and body is inevitable.
Then Sondo, the trigger, when a sailor got it, the lonely ronch and the sailor got it, and sailor got it, you know, be 2 years, and sailor say you say chat to shoot him level. Then the say shoot him level, corona, you know, number doing it, number than thing at Matobi thing is in Slav.
So therefore it says very clearly, if you keep your mind that way for a long time, it says, you cause the wind energies to become serviceable. Very clear. Once this occurs, then nothing precludes the rising of bliss, as it is in the nature of such serviceability to the great mental and physical delight and bliss.
So you send your corona, she said, send your ranching, you are seeing a thing there. Send corona is ranching, jamba de ton de secha de legua, chini de secharoa. Send on this what you're doing it, send ranching, you are saying you secha the tancha de ranching legua. That lo soa gade yobache, and kala you just tell a secha de level, and in so nghe sẽ cái tên cái số lo cái xong thì mà ngã cho thu đăng gì rồi mà đừng cái tên là tôi mới lo cái mà cho na tên là gì rồi mà đừng cái không sẽ ở mà đó.
So here, when one is able to, rest one's mind, as we talked about earlier, rest your mind non-discursively, clearly in a blissful state, then one is able to, prolong that state for, quite a lengthy period of time, sorry. And as a result of such practice, will then give rise to the blissful, experiences of body and mind. So then here, when I'm, it's also, this is my own observations here now. I would say that sometime when someone is remaining in a Tugdam state, individual who may have not realized emptiness, gain a perceptual realization of emptiness. However, as such individual may be able to rest his or mind on the mind in a non-discursive, clear and blissful state. So there's also a possibility that one can be able to remain in the Tugdam state by remaining one's mind non-discursive, clear and blissful state.
这一了没生意娘嘞，建议就刚讲的都是啦，他都人的永远都是师傅了，这都觉得来对我也人多，来对我师傅了，刚才我说可对呢，对我用没有说的弄来种吃嘛就这些人多，弄来种吃的没把修了嘛，东西没把积累，刚来下子的了，先刚的那啥的了，弄的了那把的弄成就把经营啥的去年的，弄那啥积累那有的弄来种吃不够了。张就대화 차이니까 대화랑 신뢰고요도 대체 미일라마 세나 용거를 강정했더라.
So such experiences of the blissful experiences can be achieved even when one is engaging in observing the meditation on nothingness. It's also possible because when you're placing your mind on nothingness or meditating on nothingness, and without any distractions, you're able to rest your mind on that, completely. Then again here, your wind you're able to withdraw your wind within your into your channels. Therefore, your winds become serviceable. And when the winds become serviceable, then the blissful experience will arise as a product.
Ni sen la sen yu yo xie xian da de me bi ga la sen yu rang do dian ba de se wo se jia ro de ji de dang sen la dang cha se jia de le yong ro se jia dang cha de ji jian yi la me xie bi so de dong sang so de ji ro a dan da ga sen bi ye rang do de yi rang ni yi ngo sen yu bi ga la sen bi rang xin de se ri ro a se ri sen dong cha de ji ro a in za de den zhe ge lo rang ngo yi dong cha de ni la yi ro mo de bi ga la ni ga se me do ba se ta ni jie de da 도바 단지 방자리 제일라 마시나 돈이 도바 지용고를 생기게 타투사 산나타서 내인지로와 하신도스.
So here now it is when you are able to rest a non-discursive, clear and a blissful state, then arising of the blissful experiences or the feelings of the blissful feeling will then arise. Because it is not, if you really think very carefully, it is not that difficult, to really to engage in such practice, because it is the matter of focusing one's mind completely on the nature of one's mind. When we speak about the nature of one's mind, it is a mere luminosity. It is just a vacuity. There's something that we're not identifying one particular object and placing on that particular object, but rather it is mere emptiness, mere empties, or completely spaced, or it's something that doesn't have any kind of object that actually exists. So therefore, when one is able to place one's mind on such a state, then the feeling of the blissful the bliss will be arisen. So here now, this kind of non-discursive, clear and blissful state of mind, it's just mere placing one's mind on on a clear and blissful, remaining one's mind mere clear and blissful state. There's no object of negation is involved in that. But when it comes to the realization of emptiness and placing one's mind on complete ultimate nature of reality, or meditating on the reality, this involved a negation of object, or this involved a negating the objects, that is the negation of objects, or the negation of object. And as a negating that object, then one realizes the emptiness. And if one is able to realize this emptiness, then one can place one's mind clearly on the emptiness or ultimate nature of reality. So Rinpoche said, well, we'll once again repeat the last sentence here. Therefore, since bliss, clarity, and non-discursive are present in the concentrations that know emptiness, yet very often occurs in concentration that are not directed towards emptiness. You have to differentiate this too.
Yile jeba jene secha yunzi dang, jeba kaya maja yasha di secha yunzi se, kaya maja be secha yunzi de sheba ge rando de tenbare, danji yile jeba jebe di yugu bini sige jeba de jeba roa.
The clarity and non-discursiveness, difference between that one that realizes emptiness and one that doesn't realize emptiness is different on whether or not one has gone through the critical analysis. Because one has not gone through any analysis, just mere placing one's mind on the state of non-discursive and clear and blissful state. Whereas the emptiness, when speaking about replacing one's mind on emptiness, has gone through numerous analysis. It is only as a result of critical analysis one is able to then place one's mind on the ultimate nature of reality. So now here it talks about why it is necessary to cultivate both serenity and insight. That's what
Mame shinta sewa tang longi meyawa nita dena jikun shinta sewa tang la mame mesewa long re mesewa yang long yang kasa mesewa yang se yang sadale se yang longi jue na zu na sebo metongwa yendo Sami Tentawala, te Konani, te Shiji Maloba, Nibi Sherodan, Semi Bale, Chetan Deba, Nebi Mueva, Nida Dena, te Konani Sewa, Tonge, Senjin de Metroa, Nebi Metobi Tingen Zen, Yejang, Yelu Tobi Sheramena, te Konani Tavi Midan Teve, Tingen Zen, Jizang Kong Jang, Yelu Toba Misila, Dame, Dame de Tente Konani Kondichibi, Tawa Yejang, Sensi Jit never Timbi Tingen Zin Mena, Jean Meba Yoyi, Nantoki Long Juba Yin Luchi Ten Sewa Tom Mississippi Shir, Shelanika Gangu De, Gone Baba Le, Sondo.
So here now why it is necessary to cultivate both. Here now it talks about the reason why is it insufficient to cultivate either serenity or insight alone. Why it is necessary to cultivate both. I'll explain. If you light an oil lamp for the purpose of viewing a picture in the middle of the night, you will see the depictions very clearly if the lamp is both very bright and undisturbed by wind. If the lamp is not bright or is bright but flickering in the wind, then you will not see the image clearly. Likewise, when looking for the profound meaning, you will clearly see the clarity. You clearly see the reality if you have both wisdom that unerringly discerns the meaning of reality and unmoving attention that stays as you wish on the object of meditations. However, if you do not have wisdom that knows how things are, even if you have a non-discursive concentration in which your mind is stable and does not scatter to other objects, then you lack the eyes which see reality. Hence, it will be impossible to know how things are, no matter how much you develop your concentrations. And even with the perspective that understands reality, selflessness, if you lack the firm concentrations that stays one-pointedly on its object, then it will be impossible to clearly see the meaning of the way things are, because you will be disturbed by the wind of uncontrollably fluctuating discursive thoughts. This is why you need both serenity and insight. So undisturbed, referring to serenity, and seeing the reality, referring to the understanding, emptiness, which is the insight.
Yula number Iwan Jeje, Longinanda Dubi, Mamejendo, Temba Munjoro, Teana, Ishita no Shinta Sewa Munjonte, Teana, Tenicatan Chewa, Tenicatan Java Temba Shao, Temba O, Station, Papa Thomas.
So here the Kamalachala's second stages of meditation says, with bare insight that lacks serenity, the yogi's mind is distracted by objects. Like an oil lamp in the wind, it will not be stable. For these reasons, what sublime wisdom sees will not be very clear, as this is so. They rely equally on both. Therefore, the great final Nirvana Sutra, Mahaparinirvana Sutra says.
Papa Yonsu Yangilan Deba Chimbi Dole, Nieto Nanjin Ne, Tijishipi Ri, Matonde, Dingenzi Che Shedang, Shero Chung Shero, Shanchu Samba Nanjine, Nanjine, Tom Meji, Mesede, Shero Che Shedang, Dingenzi Shu Chung Shero, Shu Shero, Dejen Shebene, Tangji Zide, Shenedang Haton Tsumba Dembi Shero. So
here now it says the great final Nirvana Sutra, the Mahaparinirvana Sutra says, Sharvaka do not say the lineage of Tathagatas. So the lineage of Tathagatas, because their concentration is greater than their wisdom. Bodhisattva sees it, but unclearly, because their wisdom is greater than their concentrations. The Tathagata sees everything because they have serenity and insight in equal measure.
Deni chicha tomete deshe shiva mado yomarwa demba niga chicha to tombe loti takarang le jane rehe de ja ani chida ina koron ramje tse ni tingin zinje na ne shera ni je na ne teje shena ani shangchu sembe ge ripi na de taye bu ne tunyu to ba de ani tiba me bale me so ro di chane shera ena de shangchu semba la ya ji shera de me seba ke je mares deni chicha tombe shera de yomares.
So here now, it is not to say that the bodhisattvas, it says bodhisattvas, it says like bodhisattvas says, but clearly, unclearly, because their wisdom is greater than their concentration. It is not to say that the bodhisattvas have not actually gained the realization of serenity or the concentrations. With regard to the emptiness. What it says here is now, it's actually referring to the realization of two truths simultaneously. Because the realization of two truths simultaneously can only be, the simultaneous realization of two truths can only be, which can only be realized by the on the Buddhas or someone who is completely enlightened. There's no one who can have the simultaneous realization of the two truths apart from the Buddha. That's all. So Shimichi said it's already past the time, so let's take 10 minutes. So we'll come back at 5:20.
Sanje Jindo Minde Beoi, Logan no Doshin no Jobo Jo Yudon Guru, Minde no no Yon Do Yo Mi. Ai. 되지. 시에 숨베셔로 대전데 대신 시에 던질 수 있대. 시내다 통 숨바 뎀비 셔로 시에까지인데 시내지 답지네 마음에 롱메바 잡아 젠도 넘버도 롱난지 생 요와 민저로 라송케네 따와 님비 자와 타다 방베 젠다게 미시데 나와 주민 돌레 지게도 신내도지 요하면 번저를 하던 기네 랑 저당자와 저를写送吧 다보写送 아유 괜히 말해나
Lam Rim nghe được tiếng Anh nêm mình đó em anh em gì sẽ thế With the power of serenity, your mind, like a lamp placed where there is no wind, will be unmoved by the winds of discursive thoughts. With insight, others cannot divert you, since you have abandoned the infinite entanglements of bad views, as the Moonlamp Sutra or the Chandra Pradipata Sutra says. The power of meditative serenity makes your mind steady. Insight makes like a mountains. So,
네,写送吧 따라오지. 대정아 저대로. 제다이네 신내 코로나 맞아 가서 신내 맞아 상대의 편식을 거라. 아니 야나 요미를当的 미박이는 주세에 제당래다. 얘나 단다 일을 제바제비 차네. 아니 돈유도비 싫어요서나 로병원 있는 로고 말해. 그러 무비네스 강의 베테는 제바제거만도 현다 정원도 로고 말해. 자왕님박이 온도 로고 말해. 다원 년바원 로고 말해.所以 tempo tsasa tanzhendo. Masu meti tempo ere jenda kan yoga mare se na gire.
So, this, the both meditative serenity and then emptiness, the realization of emptiness, which is insight. So if one has gained the insight into the ultimate nature of reality, then you will not be, you will not be diverted by this bad views. You will not be disturbed by the bad views, because you have already gained the perfect view of emptiness.
Ande shene tempo yin se shi tempo rochi. Ani haton tempo yin se de jen yi on de dotu mare se dochi. Tanda dino ro de shene se de senji yo de jabare se rani senji yo. Ani haton tempo re se lo de jeba jen da yo de ro mare so an dochi. Re do. Jen yin ga le cha de do.
So having gained this perfect serenity will not let yourself be distracted by the external objects. And having gained the realization, insight into the nature of reality, in other words, emptiness, you will not be affected by the other views or the wrong views or the bad views.
당가 속에 내 이거스 봐봐 가리 시에실에 시고 얼서나 신에다 하도니까 강고래 가리잖아 강고래서 이게 뒤에 롱 가리 시제 전에 진짜 가리시는 뒤걸 과대 바도이나 좀 로데 걸라 시에에 소속이 생기 과든 내가 차도.
So here now we are engaging in this we're engaging in discussions of importance of cultivating both serenity and insight, right? So when we go through the reading of this particular chapter, which is importance of cultivating insight and serenity, whatever the explanation that we find here and citations from different sources and so on, all will emphasize us on how important it is to cultivate both serenity and insight into emptiness.
나보다 먼저 내 동보선은 매일 어디 유는 주치 계시셔서는 신도 고지기도 신도 가와리도서 롱기 잡대전에 도고요. 근데 롱모버 장거에 되려면 전전은 신고기를 인비 거라 근데 롱모버 장거에 진짜되는 요거래. 제당이 니걸들 세금이다.
We have a lot of sources, the citations that we may find in this. A lot of sources from it, lot of explanations and the passage from different sources, the authentic sources, because for us as initial practitioners, when it comes to the explanation of the extremely obscure phenomena, we really need a support from the authentic sources. It is therefore we find a lot of passage that we find and cited from a lot of sources to really to understand into the nature of extremely obscure phenomena. So there are many phenomena. One gains a realization of those very obscure phenomena. One can gain the realization of those obscure phenomena only by relying on those authentic sources or the quotations or the quotes from different authentic sources.
ngaso logi jutsu de ji yang kwa ji ma le na ka he de ji be me so de ji tong si ge ga sa ngaso mo cha de ngaso gong yi xie ge yi jian chang de ji le de lo ni de le ji be yi ji xie ba de le ngo bi ta ngo da ri bi de se be da ni de xin guo jin ce de ma de long jin ce de xian de xin guo ge de do ge se de ge ji xie bi ge la lo le gong ba de lo yin ju ren de ji ye su su nyang le su ge me na ya de guo ji ma ce yi na ni mo bo ji le ya de ji be me de tong si ge lo.
So we as the initial stage, the practitioner of initial stage, as we all know that we always follow our sense consciousness. We hardly follow our mental consciousness. It is really true, because we don't, most of the time that we do is something that we follow, something that we see, hear, touch, and feel, and so forth, right? So now, when it comes to the explanation of the Dharma, then there are explanation of the phenomena, the obscure phenomena, or the manifest phenomena, and extremely obscure phenomena. So when you go through those obscure phenomena, it really, we really need reasonings which enables you to gain some kind of conceptual understanding of the obscure phenomena. And then extremely obscure phenomena, you need to have authentic sources which gives you a reason of understanding that obscure phenomena.
다 뒤서 다 정으로 이제 가진 세나리에 다 가진 하면 다 자가 옛날에 용로도 저기 파수 신주제야 되는 뭐야 다도 대마도 단단 맞추기 미디텔라 다지 치치유면서 때 정으로 지러와 뒤가라 뒤서 지 문주 미나야 지 태성이를 뭐도 되지 차그리마도 뭐저때 문주기를 제선당도 전저라.
So most of the time, we as ordinary beings, we are the followers of the understanding of manifest phenomena. We don't really think about the obscure phenomena, particularly at this time, at a modern area, we are really followers of a science. So science is really based on understanding of not really obscure phenomena, but the manifest phenomena.
다 대나서 그비 진센터서 대나서 들어도 가서 배세 존이나 지체돼 있으나서 전주 장용을 그래서 고집들이 다 양년들이 정해는 다 도도 되는 소용 소리 지어래.
So then, so the mark. So here in the Tibetan text, it always says it is therefore, or the so. So when you say the so, if you look at here, it's now that really tells a lot in the Tibetan text when it says so. That means it is because of what we have said earlier. Then you should do this. Will begin from this, paragraphs.
대나지 세미 빨리 미니와 가자들 해내 되바네 세네절라지인라 스테리 다메비테 코나니 또네 다다 따와라 소비 따와 님바나 방데 페이지 그에 규미니비 저탄자와 하통게 라제 인베 대나 소스셔와 샤오 서르 다 가서 존재듯이 걸어와 강비 존재.
So now here it says, so the mark of meditative serenity is that your attention stays right where it is placed without distractions from the object of meditations. The mark of insight is that you know the reality of selflessness and eliminate bad views, such as the view of self. Your mind is like a mountain in that it cannot be shaken by opponents. Therefore, you should distinguish these two marks.
강게 체 신의 두비 체 시나네 하정 요이 전 도베 다미 비튼 체 세와 저베 하동게 세무요이 차 메도비 신의레 저와 인지 인루 도비 차 신의레 저와 메데 베나 마메 주 세와 시비 차 동부당 명하마레 제이 롱주비 요와소 레 메제와 양 마메 요이 템비 차데 요에스 소레 제와 제노 손도 다지 강이 되치데 지바레 땡차 유메.
Now here it says, before you achieve meditative serenity, you may use discerning wisdom to analyze the meaning of selflessness, but your mind is extremely unsteady like a lamp in the wind. So your concept of selflessness is unclear. On the other hand, if you analyze when you have achieved serenity, you avoid the fault of extreme unsteadiness. So your concept of selflessness will be clear. Thus, the mental state of insight has a quality of steadiness, which derives from non-discursive meditative serenity, and the quality of knowledge, how things exist, which does not derive from the meditative serenity. For example, a lamp's stability, lamp's ability to illumine forms, forms derives from the weak and the preceding movement of flame. It does not derive from such things. Of the steady flame of the lamp does not derive from the screens. Thus, if you engage in analysis with the wisdom possessed of the meditative equipoise of serenity, as state undisturbed by laxity of excitement, then you will understand the meaning of reality. With this in mind, Compendium of T80 Sutta, Dhamma 90 Sutta states, when your mind is meditative equipoise, you will understand the reality just it is.
세고 통고로 당가 조인에 다로와 대나 이게 배나 마음에 세보요 때 동보 마마다 마음에 제거리마도 요에제 요 여버제 말이요 요 여벌 때는 땡차 되버와 맞아 롱르디 롱이 요한테 가서나 마음에 들을 땡차 되어버리마도 가서 논체 되그리마도 마음에 세워대 코레 세그 말 마음에 세워대 동보당 마음에 하만에 제버와
So here, on the other hand, it says if you analyze when you have achieved serenity, you avoid the faults of extreme steadiness, right? So your concept of selflessness will be very clear. Thus, the mental state of insight has a quality of steadiness, right? You have the steadiness, which derives from non-discursive meditative serenity and quality of knowing how things exist, which does not derive from the meditative serenity. So it is given a very good example here. It says, for example, it's a lamp's ability of illumine forms derives from the wick, and the preceding movement of flame. It does not really derive from the things as a screen that protects it from the winds. However, the stability of the steady flame of the lamp does not derive from the possess of the meditative equipoise of serenity, a state of undisturbed by laxity and excitement.
When Mamma Pai Chan Su Tedan, any Nasaneluki Tani, Tombani de Chipasane, any tell a Chanel, Shalata, son the Debugone, Niluki Tanto Citedan, any Mamela, Yoi, the Nasiala Jasera, Yala Jabugone, Nizusewa Tonsinide, Nipetan Chipaja de Redwa.
So that the clarity of the light from the oil lamp sees the form very clearly. It represents the seeing the emptiness without any distractions. But then the serenity with the serenity is a lamp placed in the place where it's free from wind, devoid of wind.
Teta Sensin good Menyamba maybe Shineji Nyanja Dembi Shiroji Tana Yanta Bitin Shiban Joala Gone Chuji Chuyantaba Duba Le Senyaba Jana Yantaba Jetawa Jende Jet Tawa Jin Shiban Joro Sheson de Gone Domba Le Sendo Sen Chujin de Yoi Shirin Shineji Jim Meba Neba Mede Nyamba Majabi Senjene Yang Taba Chetawa Jende Shiba Minite Jande Deji Jang Nyamba Jabi Yang Taba Chetawa Jende Rabdu Shisa Shikaze to Shiso Shine Juna Sundu. They wanted to learn such a Shiso Setibata to Soda.
So now here it says again, says, thus if you engage in analysis with the wisdom possessed of the meditative equipoise of serenity, as states undisturbed by laxity of excitement, then you will understand the meaning of reality. With this in mind, the compendium of the teaching sutra, Dharma Samgiti Sutra states, when your mind is in meditative equipoise, you will understand reality just as it is. Kamalashit's first stages of meditation says, because your mind moves like a river, it does not rest without the foundation of meditative serenity. A mind that is not in meditative equipoise cannot understand the reality just as it is. Also, the Bhagavan says, with meditative equipoise, you will you know the reality just as it is. When you achieve serenity, you will not only stop the faults of movement in the wisdom consciousness that properly analyze the selflessness, you also stop the faults of destruction from the object of meditation. Whenever you use discerning wisdom to conduct analytical meditation on topics such as impermanence, karma, and its efforts, faults, and secular existence, love, compassion, and so on.
sen nyamba jiya so na ani sen de tempo jiya bi to na ani jeba de je tu yo na yu de ga re na se bo thon tu ye ji ro wa de so do.
So here now it says, whenever we speak about one's mind is remaining in equilibrium, that means your mind is not distracted by laxity or excitement. If your mind becomes free of laxity and distractions, then you are able to remain your mind in equilibrium. When your mind is able to remain in an equal state, then one can engage in meditations, correctly.
senji yunte jebala chujende chulo sakin hyo goba nangi senji yunte desa tela sen tembo shine gore sede chulo bala chulo sun hyo goba ni peja do pe manda ni do.
So we find that two kinds of examples when it speak about with regard to the Kamalachila's the first stages of meditations, where it says, because your mind moves like a river, it does not rest without the foundation of meditative serenity. So the out of those two examples, I find the second example is more authentic or more serviceable here, where it says, just as the water needs a containers to contain the water, similarly, we need meditative serenity to contain our meditation. So therefore, it talks about how important it is to cultivate a meditative serenity.
Metapatang, Lenjetang, Kui Nimitang, Shambatang, Hinjetang, Shangchuji Senjongla, Supi, Sosotobi, Shiraji, Shegon Sheba, Tangjang, Mipala Invi, Jun Lone, Rangi Mipala, Mipa Kangila, Jet Minwan, Jupe, Gawa Kansha Tamji, Shindu, Tabchela, Shene Mani Bing Hontone, Chi, Mare Hit. Che mipa jen la inwe gejon sheba tangje tau chungde shenju le sene namba yin me nyomo chi yu tana ne she dang deje dang ne katu so yure dus she jang senje inba sheba ne deni riba deme song she song ba taro song.
So here once again it says, when you achieve serenity, you not only stop the fault of movement in the wisdom consciousness that properly analyze selflessness, you also stop the faults of distractions from the object of meditations. Whenever you use discerning wisdom to conduct analytical meditation on topics such as impermanence, karma, and its effects, the faults of cyclic existence, love, compassion, or the practice of spirit of enlightenment, no matter what your object of meditation, you engage it without distractions, so that any virtue you cultivate is much more powerful. On the other hand, before you reach serenity, you weaken all of your virtues deeds by frequent distractions to other objects. As Shantideva was engaging in Bodhisattva deeds, Bodhisattva Charya states, the person whose mind is distracted, lives between the fangs of the reflections, and one knows reality and said that prayers, austerities, and such, even if practiced for a long time, are pointless if done with a distracted minds. Thus, the aim of attaining concentrations in which your mind is non-discursively stabilized on the single object without distractions is to have mental serviceability and the ability to willfully direct your attention to the virtuous object of meditations. If you fix your attention on here.
되지. 대다 맞아 녀녀 좀 주고로. 배나 추 간대지 제나야. 너희 영어도 저리 인라면은 제대로 되다. tempo 제네 제니도 tempo 제 편식으로 지단에 맞죠. 진행파 유슈 알레.
So, let's not talk about serenity, but even if one is engaging in the practice of Dharma, right? If one engages in the practice of Dharma with the influences of laxity or excitement or the mental wanderings, that your practice would not become meaningful or purposeful.
지단 제나 신내되다 신나티모 개체리고 인지미디 넘버 인거 제만다. 다 신내 드루비되는 남비게 메타바 감바네 존데다 다 조베 산지지 고고 마타지 봐도 아니 신내 옆에도는 레가지잖아 신도는倒切我的送도아 대면은 너희 영어들로나 아니 지제 되면은 저거를送도아 지시셔.
So here, when speaking about the practice of calm abiding or the serenity, the practice of calm abiding or serenity is not something that is exclusive practice for Buddhist practitioner or Buddhism. This practice is common to the non-Buddhist tradition as well. However, if one's practice as a Buddhist practitioner, if one's practice or Dharma practice is based on the cultivation of serenity or the calm abiding, then your practice, such as meditation on emptiness, love, compassion, spirit of enlightenment, and so on, will really become powerful.
예자지 맞아 단다 메유 단다 제스쇼라기 단다는 세제 넘버 인위메 녀모 치유 차번 차는에서데 맞추데 텔 빼자데 베나 치와진게 세제 도바진게 차발라 아니 샤다 시우라 소바다 네바데 지바레스 나이 영어도 제나 겨와잖아 깨지 되니라 사샤고 깨지 되니라 겨와도 정샤고리 소한데레.
So here we have found that earlier that we quoted from the Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which states that the person whose mind is distracted lives between the fangs of afflictions. It is just like birds or other creatures who are being between the fangs of their predator. Just like our practice, it is analogous to one's practice with this with the lack of serenities. With the lack of serenity, one's practice will really become remaining within the fangs of the afflictions, because the very next moment of your practice, you generate negative thoughts and emotions, which destroys your virtue that accumulated by one's practice.
당가서 이게 생계이어야 된 내저도 가투세에 당가서 이 다른 가도 칸도 쉬위 제와도서 생계 제와이나 되면서디 그런 추억이 팬나 희게 저부 지진도 연투고 말해 써야 되로 레도 아마 저 매버선도 자인가서 자다 배set는나 라빈도 손베 네베 정세에 라바산지 네베 정세에 된다야 되지 내가 라고에 제는 메시다 가제 되게 데뷔때 당가서 배나 상추선을 팬데 여대 손바 나기지 연투고 말와다 예 죄송.
So normally, if you really look at our practice, that when we speak about ourselves engaging in the practice of Dharma, it is somewhat, our practice is pretty much being in the fangs, within the fangs of our afflictions. For example, I myself, I engage in the practice such as recitations and have my daily recitations and so on and so forth. But I wouldn't say that again at the same time that I'm not having any result, a positive result out of my practice. But then having said that, I'm not actually having a benefit as it is mentioned in the text itself because of my own quality of practice.
맞아 최선인데 신에게 해소를 총선은 소소소소게 다 니자 조직이 되나요? 게디 간대치 제거에는 니 강라 내든 도에게
So we should always be very vigilant when one is engaging in the practice, making sure that one's practice is not being between the fangs. And this is how we begin our practice, uh, very carefully.
다 생을 땡차 지당 아니 싫어기 이제는 제투에 나제제나 다 아니 선nel로된 대니베스데 차고로 로소네 바다 아니 땡차 되어서나 되니 간제지에는 다른 가서 뭐쳐야 지 공이 이정도 전에 냐다요 통보 고바 리바 된득이 제제네 아니 삼바쿠 이정도 전에 차단로서 그 강에 되는 체용 거로 다 되게 돈에 제타라 아니 nga mo yin de te de xene yo bi ton ne dong ju xie rao ju yo so na ni se gang ge zhe dong tu ma se de lo.
So if one's practice is, if one is done one's practice in conjunction with the practice of serenity and wisdom realizing emptiness, then this practice cannot be moved or distracted by anything. It's very powerful practice because most of the time we as ordinary beings, we are one point we are actually at one moment we are engaging in the practice of Dhamma, on the second moment, and whatever the practice we may have done, it's already it's then destroyed because our mind is, we are really very much remaining under the power of our reflections.
맞아 되게 담바데 지고 말에 쇼케네 gond아네 zon데 라니기 가르 제그도 땅에게 전바데 땡소 아니나 아니 다 링하기 쇼보 뭐 쇼지 메게 시원도 로고 말에 송고요와.
So not only that one be mindful at the time of one's recitations and chantings and so forth, but also as a practitioner right from the beginning of one's day in the morning, and really be vigilant of what one is doing and make sure that you're actually engaging in any kind of actions of the body, speech, and mind is actually supported by our mindfulness.
근데 전바데 템비토네 베나 칸도서 다니 킬로미터세 시푸는 로장이 냥냥이나 메기 간데지 통고야나면라니 시딩을 쥐어투에지 뭐네 저기 냥냥은 도와.
So if one is able to stabilize one's practice of mindfulness, then one will be able to remain very calm regardless of what is happening, what happens to her, and how the others view that one's as us. We will be able to remain very calm and happy, as we find in the 8 verses of training the mind.
대다 나서 메바질라 세제데 메이 마토바 조비 띵엔지 주비 고파네 세기 메발라 제탄데데 도 고도 롱이 레롱 주비 시인라 대양 세 메발 질라 대나 데투 투라 따나 이레 따나 요아 데몰라 추장바타 게 메바 타야발라 제탄 데바타 로아 시 옌베 신내도나 제타와 당 진행비 유라비비 싫어당 동의선당 동의선다 동비선다 조바다 준주다 대바다 조실라서바 타예비 개와 뒤바당 타예비 전도비 미나 정고바 인제 뒤전도 미바질라 따네 조베네 신내도비 고바 마셰바 게졸라 뭐 전부 민중화 시바 샤오 송도듯이
So now here it says, now, if you fix your attention on the single object of meditation, you can keep it there. But if you release it, right, it will proceed as you wish to limitless virtuous object. Just like water drawn into smoothly flowing irrigations, ditches. Therefore, after you have achieved meditative serenity, you must sustain in meditations object and attitudes that stops limitless faults and bring together limitless virtues, such as wisdom consciousness, focusing on the real nature and the diversity of phenomena. Generosity, the attitude of restraint, patience, choice, perseverance, faith, and discernment with cyclic existence. Realizing that continuously stabilizing your mind by fixing it on the single object of meditations yields on the great advantages in the practice of virtue for those who do this will well practice the purpose of achieving serenity.
대다로 나서 생각적으로 근데 탄대지 주부지 신내 누구였나 신내 주부 거바데 아니 선바 템보여비 때네 아니 다 정도네 주부 상지지 고번을 만족지 봐도 유대 주 전탄지 도비 된다래마도 뒤진도 선바 자서질에 대투와 다지 신내 주어이나 신내 거바 마시베 다래 손도아.
So here is a serenity. Achieving serenity, appreciate the purpose of achieving serenity. Here now, right from the beginning of our practice, such as taking refuge in three jewels, must be done on the basis of achievement of the serene state of mind, all the way to the state of enlightenment. Because it has a great benefit and great result achieved. Well, a great result will be achieved by means of engaging in the practice, one's spiritual practice, on the basis of achievement of serene state of mind.
되지. 나서 세거라. 딱 그지 나서 된도아. 변나 가사 마주 개정을 뭐 첨부 민중아 셰바샤바세데. 나서 뭐 첨부세데 동 첨부. 그러와. 약간 첨부 채트고 말해 써야 돼. 그러와. 근데 저 말아 변나 가서 신주도 지쟁에나 신내지 일을 지으면 일하면 신내 지건 중에 지나 변나 메들로 든지 제지 댕에나 메들게 타줄 때를 간대지 작을 해서나 맞죠? 내저 시사 말아.
So, without having a both practice of serenity and insight, we will not be able to achieve much out of it. Just mere cultivation of calm abiding or the serenity. Let's take an example of engaging in meditation on nothingness. So you have spent your entire time by cultivating this serenity, merely meditating on nothingness. Then when it is time for us to depart from this world, when the ultimate journey occurs, then we don't know what is going to happen to us, what will the result that we may have out of engaging in such practice. We have not, if this is the case, if one is engaged only on practice, focusing only on the practice of serenity, then we have not done much. So here now we're speaking about only if you think that just mere practice of serenity is adequate. That is what we're talking about. But we need a serenity. We're not rejecting this practice of serenity. Serenity is needed. Thus, if you reject analytical meditation without discerning wisdom, both in the deed sections of the perfections and the view sections of perfections, your cultivation of one-pointed concentration will be very weak. the technique for producing a forceful and long-lasting, certainty about the meaning of the selflessness is sustained analysis with the discerning wisdom. Without such insight into the real nature, no matter how long you cultivate serenity, you can only surface manifest afflictions. You cannot eradicate their seeds. Therefore, do not cultivate only serenity. You need to cultivate insight as well. Insight as well as because it's a accumulation. Second stage meditation stage.
내가 세보세요. 다 간제 다 maybe 되는 날에 쇼쇼세대 상추산라 소바기 쇼비쇼라시. 따이쇼세대 다음에 봐. 간제 따이쇼의 냐네는 쇼비쇼제 냐네 간이나야 아니 신에다 하도니가 손대는 존데마도 지장제 진 패고만을 하버도 따이쇼라 아니 신에다 오지랑지를 쟁이나 아니 녀몽 코로기 지 제네 대신비 내거라 녀모 메제와세든 고나 바사세 메제와자 제마도 녀모 사베다지 제마제메도 소투고 말해 라도면나.
So here now it talks about importance of having insight. Particularly here we are talking about the insight into the nature of reality, the insight into ultimate nature of reality, which is referring to emptiness. It's clearly mentioned that says, if you reject analytical meditation with discerning wisdom, both deed sections, deed section here referring to the practice of spirit of enlightenment, okay? And then both deed sections of the perfections referring to the practice of spirit of enlightenment or the bodhicitta, and the perfection in the view sections referring to the practice of wisdom realizing emptiness. So now, if one's practice is not conjoined with these two, just mere cultivation of serenity or calm abiding, it may surfaces or your manifest afflictions at the moment, but it will not have the ability to eradicate the propensity of these afflictions. And propensities will always remain within the stream of one's mind. So this is always ready to germinate and develops into the manifest negative thoughts and emotions later.
대신 당연히 되서 사실 거리 바발에서 이 상자의 자생이다. 대자는 튼린 세티도 줘서 말이야. 제가 다 이게 고릉에 바보도 로서스 도마서 다 처음에 다 인자는 거 좀,就是얘기를 하네. 제 개선 지식이 자체 아니 근데 이제 강화셔봐 되다. 뒤송도 사비 교환나. 맞송이 뒤송서 말에 네 제화나 뒤송사비 교환나 쇼지도 더라 되네서 이제. 근저지라 되네. 지 단 남비존에 손베게네 신내다 하더니 손데베 냐자래네. 다이의 쇼비쇼. 네 강가 네 냐자래네. 조비 상제지 고거는 뭐 맞도 봐니. 진행자 터보셔 대터비 셔도네 베네쇼비 남았다 저가나데 신조로도서 안 초초소만하게 조조칠래. 아니 지 소소라지 지금서 나도 베비지를 칼레게서 네 소소라지 로봇쟁이 레스다바에 강 제바데니라 기유출라 미바치. 저와 기유출라 강 미바치 저변용하는데 맞아 지 자체문의 시에서나 약근초라 아니 로봇 근초선에 로봇쟁이에서는 칠레나게서는 지 아니 지 추주소마 조다 칠레 아니 맞으게 지 맞아 돌로마바 강에서는 아니 템비젠달라 소바기 근데 다게 강아지 받아서 강가 쇼지도 담배 털어대네 아니 공아집에 걸어 던지게 자체 못 먹어.
So let's do our dedication now here as usual. As we have gathered here today and engaged in receiving the teachings for last 2 hours, by means of accumulating such virtue, by merits, and also the accumulation of virtues of the 3 times of myself and that of all other sentient beings, it is due to such merits, henceforth, may I achieve the practice of both deeds and views, and may all beings, may I be able to establish entire sentient beings to the state of complete enlightenment by the virtue, by means of the virtue that I have accumulated. And also, may all those Dharma protectors and gaze upon us and protect us from all those obstacles. And so everything that we do, we have a practice that supports our practices and removing our obstacles. That we as a practitioner, there's many obstacles and obscurations that's to be eradicated, cleared by the Dharma protectors and so forth. And also all those, for the Sanghas, traditionally Sangha will always have their benefactors. May all the benefactors who actually benefits the Sangha communities be protected by the Dharma protectors, and accumulate merits to gain the state of enlightenment. So there are many, not only the general Sangha community and the particular Sangha community, Sanghas, including myself, there are many who actually benefits us as well. Material benefits. Kado yamba ganshe saba de lomi mare kedon rowa nanren jaye ombo daju ji dema subi chao kyodo jabe yangje tsebe jezone dembe rimba kyozan nanje nene jobe jena nyeje jo range jejen dobe nanje ne 修正自愿超越头给之，若越也就明白这些呢。教育担保有人真纠结，两保人情出给莫交保，家长两保具备说的呢。年纪轻不一让就保也，对是我写不说，世间教育没用出来。 列住上就能接人别讲，当的能接也能别的心，家也是把人都讲究起，老上周边天天主些起，夜间世界没当没面去，才让更多家也没把也，老当这我没就起。 好似天把救了去学习，最近住了怎么天边子，土地能就大多主席的，这些将此说，有就一起，就是那面国在朝天的，那个天天就结巴，路上点别这面啥送的。 若也面色大多年久结，帮助人人过于心安。天堂的我毛的永远的，现在在我的子叫做也，小别身体不。 年久一起，将别抱怨接大钱包头，更多上坡天阳天线的，得到根据就是道路是，给我得到当街绕多我，对从西边叫我当街，我搞了就多我不的。
道见觉愿早晚的愿教，众波世界道度我。呀，多谢，Thank you。